All right, Larry Krueger here from the Pig and a Pickle Krug Show with a little 49er video as we discuss the winners and losers from the 2025 NFL Draft on the Niners roster. Let's hit that coming up next. First, we're brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out. They're in Emeryville. They're in Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out, and they do run out. So get there early, get some brisket chili, go say hi to Damon and Mary. Tell them the Krug sent you. We're also brought to you by Sharp Corners, sports cards and collectibles. They're at 205 Cypress Avenue in Pacific Grove, California, on the Monterey Peninsula. My friend Anthony Catania is there at 831-521-5264. All right, every draft cycle produces a whole crop of new players. It's funny because every year people are like, well, we're going to need a bunch of new draft picks. Everybody does. I would say almost every roster in the NFL on a yearly basis adds 15 to 20 new guys. That's just the turnover that's involved in the sport. And every time there is a draft, there is an opportunity to kind of shuffle the priorities on the roster. And some guys, the draft, gives them opportunity. And other guys, the draft hands them nothing but more of a challenge because their spot on the roster just got deeper and more packed, and the competition becomes more severe, and it's just more and more difficult to earn that roster spot because, man, last year there were 5 wide receivers that were pretty good. This year there's 8 wide receivers that are pretty good. It's going to be a lot more difficult to make the roster as a wide receiver. So that's what we're going to look at. Who are the winners? Who are the losers from this last version of the NFL draft? Whose situation got easier? Whose situation got a lot more difficult because of the draft that we just witnessed? So let's start with the winners because it's always more fun to start with the winners. One guy who is absolutely a winner in this whole equation is Mason Pline. Mason Pline last year was given the redshirt year by the 49ers. He was a converted basketball player who played at Ferris State, transferred to Furman, has a lot of ability. Niners got him as an undrafted player. They brought him in, and they gave him the full redshirt year. They weren't tempted to activate him at any point. They said, nope, we're just going to let you redshirt for the full year. And so he then goes into this offseason as a pretty decent candidate to make the roster. Well, the Niners at tight end extended George Kittle. They signed Luke Farrell, a blocking tight end. So now really they've set up a situation where unless they bring in a veteran, and maybe they will, they're looking at a competition this summer, most likely, of Kittle spot secure, Farrell spot secure, but Braden Willis, Jake Tongas, and Mason Pline are going to battle for one spot, that receiving tight end spot. And I think Pline's got a great chance to earn that spot. He's the biggest body. He's got great hands. He's got leaping ability. He's got even some upside as a blocker, while the other guys are really more limited as receivers. So I think Mason Pline is a definite winner from this draft class, just from the standpoint. Niners didn't draft a tight end, didn't trade for a tight end, didn't sign a tight end after the draft. And I think it sets up nicely for Pline to make the roster. Another 2 guys that I think are definitely in a better spot today than they were last week at this time, and that's anybody who can play offensive tackle on the 49er offensive line. So obviously your starters are Trent Williams and Colton McKivitz, but really because the Niners were unable to find a tackle in this draft, Spencer Burford and, they picked up DJ Humphries after the draft, but Austin Pleasance and Spencer Burford, I think, are winners because there's not as much competition at offensive tackle. Now, I would imagine maybe Pleasance and Burford are competing for one spot. I would imagine DJ Humphries is going to get that 3rd tackle spot. So maybe Burford, as a guy who can play tackle and guard, gets the roster spot, backup spot. So we'll see. We know the starters are probably going to be Trent Williams, Ben Barch, Jake Brendel, Dom Pooney, Colton McKivitz. DJ Humphries is probably going to be one of the backups. You also have Nick Zakelj, Matt Hennessy, Connor Colby, Spencer Burford, Drew Moss from Colorado State, Drake Nugent, Austin Pleasance, Jalen McKenzie. So there's guys there. But I would say the guys who can play tackle, Burford and Pleasance, definitely are one of the winners because the Niners didn't address that in the draft. Let's go over to the defensive side of the ball because I think there's some winners on the defensive side of the ball. I'll say Teron Jackson's a winner, and a lot of you may not even know who Teron Jackson is. Teron Jackson played at Coastal Carolina, had brief cups of coffee with Carolina Panthers and the Philadelphia Eagles. Niners signed him late in the year. He's a pretty good pass rusher. He really is. And the fact is, the Niners have Nick Bosa and Mikael Williams. Those are their starting edge rushers. They have Yatir Gross-Matos and Sam Aquinu. Those are, edge rusher 2 or edge rusher, let's say 3 and 4. And then it really comes down to a battle between Drake Jackson, if he's healthy, Robert Beal, Jonathan Garvin, Alex Barrett, and Teron Jackson for that 5th and final defensive end spots. They're probably going to keep 5 defensive ends and 5 defensive tackles, a total of 10 defensive linemen. And I would say Teron Jackson because they didn't draft a second defensive end, and they have Mikael Williams, but I thought they would potentially go either 1 defensive tackle and 2 defensive ends, or 2 defensive tackles and 1 defensive end, and they went 1 defensive end and 2 defensive tackles, and it really does give Teron Jackson an inside shot at I think that final roster spot. So I thought he was a big winner. I thought Jair Brown was a big winner simply because the news now that Malik Mustafa is out, and then what else you got at safety? You got Richie Grant and Jason Pinnock. You got the special teamer George Odom. You got a last year guy in Jalen Mahoney. You got a guy you signed in Quindell Johnson. You drafted Marquise Siegel in the 5th round. But there's no, who's going to start at safety? You need starters. And Jair Brown, I think his spot became more secure with the injury to Malik Mustafa. You're going to go with 2 new starters at safety? Most likely not. So I think Jair Brown was one of the winners. Another winner I thought on offense was Ricky Pearsall. Ricky Pearsall, the 49ers could have easily drafted a starting wide receiver, but they didn't. So it's Ricky Pearsall and Jawan Jennings as your starters at wide receiver. They have some backups in Demarcus Robinson and Jordan Watkins, Jacob Cowing, Tariq Owens, Isaiah Hodgins, Junior Bergen, Isaiah Nayer, Trent Taylor, Russell Gage. I mean, they've got other guys here. But as far as starters go, Ricky Pearsall is going to start at wide receiver in his second year in the pros. So he was a big winner. And I'll say this, the last big winner was Tanner Mordecai, because not only did Tanner Mordecai, there was a chance that the Niners would pick a quarterback, and that quarterback would have been Riley Leonard or somebody that was going to, take that 3rd roster spot. Last year they went with 3, right? And then they went with Mordecai on the practice squad. Well, I think Mordecai was hoping to get that promotion from the practice squad to the 3rd quarterback, and it looked pretty good when it was Purdy and Mac Jones and Tanner Mordecai until the Niners drafted a quarterback. But Curtis Rourke played this year with an ACL tear, and so he's going to have that thing surgically repaired. So the Niners are going to give Curtis Rourke a redshirt season, and I think this is a major win for Tanner Mordecai, because now you have Curtis Rourke sitting there, so they're not going to go pick up another quarterback, most likely. And Rourke is most likely going to redshirt and be on the IR. So even though he's there and they're not going to probably bring in another quarterback, you're still going to be very much needed as the 3rd quarterback. So I think the presence and the draft pick of Curtis Rourke, gave the Niners some quarterback depth, but it also kind of secured Tanner Mordecai for this season. Now, maybe the Niners will go with 2 quarterbacks and make him be on the practice squad again, put him through waivers, and we'll see if he clears. Or maybe he'll have a great summer in year 2 in this offense, and Mordecai will fight Mac Jones for the number 2 job. Or Mordecai will settle in as the number 3 job, and maybe he'll be too good to put through waivers, and they'll go with 3 quarterbacks. But either way, I think the drafting of Curtis Rourke and the injury that he has is a win for Tanner Mordecai and his chances of sticking around another year on the Niners roster. All right, there are always losers as well, and there were losers in this draft. So who were the losers? All right, I'll say Jacob Cowing is definitely a loser. I mean, Coming into this draft, Jacob Cowing was essential deep speed, right? Because you have Jennings, Pearsall, Ayuk, Demarcus Robinson, Gage, Tariq Owens, Trent Taylor, Isaiah Hodgins. None of those guys can run, like as far as really run and be the deep speed. Jacob Cowing was going to be their deep speed. He is the one guy that runs in the 4.3s that they had on their roster. So I would say the drafting of, the adding of Isaiah Hodgins and Demarcus Robinson, a couple of veteran receivers, definitely crowds the room. The drafting of Junior Bergen gives the special teams coach a return man of note that I'm sure he would like to see make the team. So that's going to challenge Cowing for his roster spot. And then Jordan Watkins was drafted in the 4th round. And the fact that he was drafted in the 4th round and not the 7th round means Jordan Watkins is probably going to make the team. And he also runs 4.37. So now you aren't the only deep speed. So Cowing is one of the losers because he's now replaceable. And his roster spot is under siege. And there's no guarantee that he's going to be on the team. Another guy that I thought was a loser in this thing was Isaac Guerendo. On paper, Isaac Guerendo was RB2. He was RB2 going into this draft. The Niners drafted Jordan James in the 5th round out of Oregon, but then they also signed Corey Kiner, who's a really productive back out of Cincinnati, who once upon a time was like a 4 or 5-star recruit who went to LSU out of high school. He's got a nasty spin move. He's really talented. You also have Izzy Abinakanda. You have Patrick Taylor was re-signed. Obviously, CMC is coming back, and you're giving a roster spot to Juice. So Guerendo, who was RB2, may not even be RB3. He may be RB4. I would say McCaffrey's RB1. Jordan James is RB2. My guess is Corey Kiner will be RB3. And Guerendo, with some of the injuries he's had and some of the numbers that don't look particularly good as far as analytical numbers, I think he's one of the losers here. He's not going to get cut. He's going to make the roster, but he's no longer RB2. And I don't even think he's RB3. All right, who were the other losers in this thing? I would say Kalia Davis was a major loser. You're going to keep 5 defensive tackles. Okay, who are your 5? Well, you're not cutting CJ West. You just drafted him. You're not cutting Alfred Collins. He just was your 2nd-round pick. You're not cutting Evan Anderson. He was your find last year, very strong against the run. And then you have guys like Jordan Elliott and Kevin Givens, who are really suitable veterans who have been productive throughout their careers. And so you're keeping 5 defensive tackles: West, Collins, Anderson, Givens, Elliott. That's 5. Well, what about Sebastian Valdez? I don't know. We'll see about him this summer. What about Kalia Davis? And Kalia Davis is, as at times, looked amazing, like incredibly talented. And then he gets hurt. And a lot of people feel that his lower body, his legs are too skinny and that he's just always going to have injuries because of the position that he plays and those, kind of thinnish lower legs that he has. So I would say Kalia Davis's roster spot is absolutely under attack. If Evan Anderson and Collins and West show up and look good, and Elliott and Givens do what Elliott and Givens have always done, Kalia Davis could be out of work. So I think he's one of the losers. Another guy who's one of the losers, believe it or not, it's a cruel world. The 49ers Walter Payton Man of the Year, nominee, Curtis Robinson. Everybody loves Curtis Robinson. There is no better guy than Curtis Robinson. But he may not make this team. You've got Fred Warner, you've got Nick Martin, you got D. Winters. Those 3 guys are going to make it. You got Luke Gifford, who was just signed. He's going to make it. So you really have everybody else is battling for maybe 1 spot or 2. And you got Tatum Bethune, who's good. You got Jalen Graham, who's good. You got Curtis Robinson, who's obviously a veteran special teamer. You have Deshaun White, who's more of a practice squad guy. But then the Niners also added Stone Blanton. And guess what? Stone Blanton is probably going to be a cheaper version of Curtis Robinson. A guy who's really not a guy you're going to play from scrimmage, more of a special teamer, but a rookie. and a guy who was incredibly productive tackle-wise, a great athlete too. So I would say between Bethune, Graham, and Stone Blanton, one of those guys, or maybe two of those guys, are going to squeeze Curtis Robinson right off the roster unless Robinson has an amazing summer and he's coming back from an injury. But he's not getting Fred's spot. He's not getting Nick Martin's spot. He's not getting Winter's spot. And he's not getting Gifford's spot. And that's four of most teams keep 5, sometimes 6 linebackers. So you got 1 or 2 linebacker spots between Bethune, Graham, Stone Blanton, Curtis Robinson, and Deshaun White. And I'm not saying that Curtis isn't the best of those guys. He might be, but he's probably more expensive than Stone Blanton. And Blanton's probably going to do a lot of the same things. So I would say Curtis Robinson's spot is under attack. I think Patrick Taylor, same reason that Guerendo's spot's under siege. I think, look at this running back spot. Juice is there. CMC's there. Guerendo's there. Jordan James is there. I think Corey Kiner's going to make it. So that's 5 right there. So what happens to Patrick Taylor? What happens to Izzy Abanaconda? I think those guys could be challenged for their roster spot. And then lastly, Jake Moody. I mean, the 49ers are going to bring in competition, whether it's the rookie from, Louisiana Lafayette, Kenny Almendarez, or if it's a veteran. But there's no question. Jake Moody, is either going to have a really good rookie, and Almendarez was the Luke Groza Award winner as the best kicker in college football, or he's going to have a real solid veteran. But I would say Jake Moody was one of the losers as well, just because the Niners clearly don't trust him enough to give him the job. And they shouldn't. It's time for him to compete against somebody who's got a chance to win that competition. And I think he's one of the losers as well. So the winners: Pline, Burford, Pleasance, Teron Jackson, Jair Brown, Ricky Pearsall, and Tanner Mordecai. The losers: Jacob Cowing, Isaac Guerendo, Kalia Davis, Curtis Robinson, Jake Moody, and Patrick Taylor. There you go. The winners and the losers from the 49er Draft Hall. Thanks to Pig and a Pickle for being the title sponsor of the Krug Show. Thanks to Sharp Corners, Sports Cards, and Collectibles for sponsoring this video. The links are in the description. Give a like and subscribe on your way out the door. And thanks to all of you for supporting the Krug Show on YouTube.